Hey, did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.
Good evening, son-in-law. Tonight we are going to reflect on one of the most painful chapters in not only Louisiana's history, but the nation's history, Hurricane Katrina. The storm displaced hundreds of thousands, scattered families, and uprooted entire communities. The pain of those losses of homes, of neighborhoods, of stability is powerfully reflected in the story we'll hear about tonight. But Katrina also reminds us of the importance of civic engagement. When government policies fail or relax, it's the citizens who must raise their voice, demand accountability, and shape the future of their communities. Civic engagement isn't optional, it is essential today, tomorrow, and forever. As always, we invite you to be a part of this conversation. Drop your questions in the comments, like, share the broadcast, and let's keep building dialogue together. Honored to welcome tonight our guest, Karen Riley Simmons, author of Dancing While Weeping, a moving reflection on the losses her family endured after Katrina and the resilience it took to keep going. With that said, good evening, Karen.
Good evening, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Karen, you, when Facebook prompted me the other day, the first thing I did, I think it was early in the morning, whatever, I sent you a message and said, hey, can you come on and tell us about this story? And you agreed right off bat. But I tell you what, Karen, I want you to go ahead. I know I didn't throw this in some of the comments, but go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience tonight.
I'm Karen Riley Simmons. I'm not sure what else you want me to say.
Well, you're from New Orleans, but you're now living where?
I now live in Alexandria.
All right.
I now live in Alexandria. I've lived in several different cities across the states, but New Orleans is and always will be my home, and Alexandria has been my second home.
All right. I tell you what, Karen, we're going to go ahead and jump directly on into the questions. Can you take us back to that first moment? You know what? I want to know about when y'all left New Orleans. When did you guys leave New Orleans?
Jack, we left New Orleans on Sunday, August 28th, ahead of the storm hitting. It was kind of a rush job because actually we thought the forecast was saying that the storm was going to go toward Florida. And so that Saturday, we were going about our business. My daughter had an audition for dance classes and did some groceries. I actually had workers at the house replacing our storm shutters. And when we got back that afternoon, the workers were gone. And I asked my mother, I said, well, did they say anything? Because it doesn't look like they're finished. There was still holes in the overhang and all of the shutters were up. She said they didn't say anything. I looked out and they were gone. I thought, well, maybe they're gone to lunch. But then my daughter told me she was seeing reports that there was an evacuation horn. I said, the storm's going to Florida. And I still didn't pay attention. But about an hour later, I did look at the news, there was an evacuation order. By this time, it was too late for us to do anything about the shutters or, you know, protecting the windows in the house. We had to start preparing to leave. Um, that was Saturday afternoon, late afternoon. So we made a plan that we would leave the next morning as early as possible. We knew how bad the traffic could be based on Hurricane Ivan the year before, the first year that they introduced the contraflow on Interstate 10. That year it took us 11 hours to get to Jackson, Mississippi. So we knew we were going to have to leave very early. We left about 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, and the traffic was bad. It was my mother, my daughter, and my next door neighbor, who was like a second mom to me. Her kids live out of state, so she was coming with us. She had her car, and my daughter and I were in my car. It took us 9.5 hours to get to Alexandria that day. It was like a parking lot on I-10 headed toward Baton Rouge. We had chosen to come to Alexandria because we had friends here. We had family headed to Baton Rouge, but I knew that it would be crowded at my cousin's house in Baton Rouge because all of my cousins were going there. So we had friends in Alexandria. We thought we'd go there.
Okay, I'm getting a little feedback. Let's see. Can you hit your mute right quick? Can you still hear me? Hey, Karen, you there? Okay. So I remember that day as well. We were coming back from Monroe that night, and the traffic was just that bad. You know, you could see it was bumper to bumper. We were coming into Alexandria, so the traffic flow was okay. But headed north, the traffic was horrible coming back that Sunday evening. And I was in a meeting in Monroe that Saturday, and they were talking about, you know, the storm and how people were evacuating. But it was just shocking, and I'll never ever forget that, because it's just something that stuck with us, you know, from that point on. Can you take us back to the first moment, Karen, when standing before the gutted childhood home? What emotions overwhelmed you most in that moment when you guys got back down there for the first time?
Well, Jack, let me tell you about the first time my mother and I went back before the house was built, because the contrast between that moment and the moment that I write about in the article. When we first went back to the house, we had our hazmat suits on. My mother was 84 years old. She was in her hazmat, her gas mask, and the goggles, all of those things. And she was climbing over the debris just like I was. There was no stopping her. We were able to get those things that we could salvage out. But we knew we had to get back because there was debris blocking some of the rooms that we couldn't get into. So we knew we needed to go back to gather some more things. And so we left and immediately started calling. There were organizations that were doing the clean out and the gutting. And I was calling around, and they contacted two that said it would take weeks before they could get to our home, which everybody was saying it would take weeks to get to it. There were so many homes. And so I signed up with two, and I stressed to all of them that I spoke with, we need to come you're there so that we can get the rest of our things out of the house. And we were assured that, yes, we can do that. Said, if you call us, we can be there in a matter of 2 or 3 hours. I was really going to speed to get there. So I went back without my mother a few weeks later, not expecting anything to have changed at the house because it hadn't been weeks and weeks. It had just been 2 or 3 weeks. I was there to take care of some other business. And I asked a friend if he would drive me just to pass by the house. And really, I didn't recognize the house. It was so shocking to me. I thought we were on the wrong block because I could see straight through our house from the front to the back. I had no words then. It's hard. I can almost see it now. It was unbelievable. It took my breath away. And you know, the devastation that we saw when we went back to clean out, to get the things that we could, was one thing. But this felt even worse because someone had come and just vacated our house, taken all of everything. Jack, they even cut the chandelier down in the dining room, which that had nothing to do with gutting the house. They just cleaned it out.
Mhm.
And that felt like a violation. I really did feel violated. It's one thing to feel the destruction from uh, Mother Nature, you know, being things
Mhm.
washed away and destroyed. It's another to feel that fellow humans thought nothing of you and your things and your loss, to just throw your things away. And literally, some of the things that they took were of value that would not have been destroyed by water, um, like the chandelier, like my father's um, jazz album collection,
Mhm.
vinyl, you know, things like that. And so that was a true violation. And it felt worse than it did when I was there with my mother cleaning it out.
Wow. You described the house as a smaller, somehow. How did that physical emptiness reflect the spiritual or emotional emptiness you felt?
You know, when you live in a house, you have the rooms, you're moving through it, you're living in it, it embodies you, um, your memories, your personality. You live in it, it's part of you almost. And with the absence of everything, there were no walls. It was just the beams, the framework. Um, the walls, the outside walls were there, the brick walls, but inside, I mean, you could just walk through what once was a wall, just walk through. And that, in some ways, made it feel smaller. Um, the house had always felt roomy. It
Mhm.
was a 4-bedroom house. Yeah, with living room, dining room, kitchen, den. You know, it was, we had I have 3 siblings, so my parents and siblings and my maternal grandparents lived with us. So it housed us all. and for even the walls to be missing. I mentioned that it's like the organs of the house were missing and gone. And without us living and moving, like like the blood, coursing through its veins, we weren't there. Just was sleeping, kind of like a shell.
Your mom was in her 80s during that time. How did she process that loss? What did you learn from her responses, Karen?
It
Because
was
I can tell it was home. It was always it was mom's house. So how did she process that at the time?
it was very interesting. My mother was 84. I had lived away from home for 16 years and had recently moved back in 2003
Hmm.
to the death of my father. And she was vital for me. For she was still driving, still taking care of all of her business, still going to her appointments, taking care of her bank accounts, ordering her prescriptions. We even went to different churches. So she drive to church on Sunday, I drive to church on Sunday. And so it was interesting because once we evacuated, it was almost like she left everything, all of that in New Orleans. She didn't want to drive, and we evacuated in her car. My car stayed in New Orleans and drowned.
Uh-huh.
She didn't want to drive anymore. Um, she pretty much refused to make any decisions. Um, she left everything up to me, and that was new for me. I'm the youngest of her four children, and so
Hmm.
I had never been the alpha female. She was always the alpha female, abdicated and left everything to me. I had to learn really fast
Hmm.
decisions and tell my mother what we were going to do rather than say yes, ma'am. So
Hmm.
um, as it turns out, she had the beginnings of dementia and
Hmm.
and Alzheimer's, and so she just I think that experience of Katrina and that loss really exacerbated that, and she just although she remained really vital. Her decline
Hmm.
um, into Alzheimer's was very gradual.
Hmm.
There were some things that she just didn't do anymore, like drive,
Hmm.
like decisions.
Hmm.
I took over her doctor's visits and all the things like that, the care for
You talked about in the article gathering later with the family and friends scattered by Katrina. How y'all laughed, cried, and even danced together. Why was that gathering so important and to your healing and all that kind
Well, I tell you, that gathering actually was with a women's group. Um, that was one of my clients. Actually, the um, I was on the board of a women's group, and I designed the marketing collaterals for them for their conference that they had, and that everybody was scattered. Everybody was scattered. So that the year 2006, we weren't going to have a conference because everybody was scattered and still
of?
trying to recover. So what we had instead was a gathering of the board members and other closely connected people with the organization. just for healing, in order to connect and to gather, since we were all scattered, gathered in Houston, Texas. No, we gathered in San Antonio, Texas, and had a time to pray together and cry together and laugh and share our stories and share where we were, what was happening with our families. It was extremely healing because these were people who had the same experiences, and shared the same types of loss, and to be able to get together and hold each other and talk with each other. And in the finale, in the last day, we even danced and praised God that we were still here, that He had still kept us, and that even though we were separated by distance, the bond was still strong among us.
Your article weaves scripture from Psalms, the book of Psalms, and Ecclesiastes into your reflection. How did faith sustain you during the darkest days?
Well, I tell you one thing, Jack, if it hadn't been for my faith, I don't know what I would do. Absolutely. I could only rely on the Lord. I was responsible for my mother and my friend's mother,
Mm-hmm.
and my teenage daughter, and myself. And they were all looking to me to tell them what to do. What do we do now? To make those decisions. And those were critical decisions. And I had to have my hand firmly holding on to God's hand and, and praying, asking Him, what do we do now?
Mm.
You know, when you see uh, disasters on television, you see the news, and you can empathize with folks, sympathize with them, but you never know what that's like until it happens to you. The reality of losing everything, that one day we're all here together, and the next day it's all watching. But I could see um, God's hand in it.
Mm.
We came to Alexandria because I had friends here. I only had those two friends here. I didn't know anybody else. Those were friends that I met in California in the late 80s when we moved to California. We moved
Mm.
to San Jose in 1987. And I met this couple at the church building, and we became like sister and brother. They're godparents to my daughter. And then my family moved to Baltimore, and we were in Baltimore for 12 years. And then my daughter and I moved back to Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
We had been there in New Orleans about 6 months when I got an email from my friends in California and said, guess what? We moved to Louisiana. I said, yeah. Where? Alexandria, Louisiana. Why? I had forgotten that my girlfriend was from Alexandria,
Mm-hmm.
grew up in Alexandria. She had moved back home to care for her mother. And so that the summer of 2005, my daughter and I came up and spent the weekend there.
Mm-hmm.
They had just built a new home with her. And we spent the weekend there. My daughter hadn't seen them since she was 2 years old. So here she was, 14 years later. And it had been like hadn't seen them in just 2 weeks. That's what it seemed like.
Uh-huh.
And so we had just been there the second weekend of July. So when
Wow.
Katrina came, he said, "Hey, can we come up for another weekend?" So there's a hurricane, but it'll probably just be a long weekend. He said, "Sure, why not?" Yeah, well, it's my mom and my next door neighbor too, and he's like, "That's fine." They had the space, and so we came. But I could see God's hand moving back in 1987 when I met him. He already knew that
Mhm.
Katrina was coming in 2005. So, what else am I? Who else am I going to trust?
I hear you. I hear
So
you.
that faith has played a big part in my life and the course of this experience because um, I had to trust that God knew this was coming, and so He had
Mhm.
already provided for us.
Um, what do you want people, especially young people who may only know now about Katrina through history, to understand about the personal cost of what that disaster could actually bring? And specifically, like right now we have my son is an insurance adjuster for State Farm, and he probably would kill me for saying that. I was supposed to just say an insurance adjuster, and not say who. So I apologize. Hope not very. We get it. He'll probably look at this one and he'll probably call me and fuss. So, but anyway, he talks about the the claims processing part that he does right now, and sometimes with the storms that have been happening throughout the Midwest, and that's kind of where he's parked at right now. It's just this same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So, what would you have to say to them young people who may only know of Katrina in history, but just you don't know where anything could happen at these days? And what advice would you give to them?
I would say that, well, there's a, there's something to be said for being ready. What I mean by being ready is to understand what the priorities are, to make sure you know what your priorities are. Life is a priority, not things.
Mhm.
Even though in my article I talked about the loss of the things, but I talked about it not the things in themselves, but what they represent in my life, in my life. Um, but even with those losses, the fact that my mother and my neighbor and my daughter and I were safe and we landed safely and softly in Alexandria. We didn't have some of the traumatic experiences, as traumatic experiences some folks had who weren't able to evacuate or who had had to stay in the Superdome or had to, like my uncle, who had to be airlifted out of his house. We were together, we had our lives, and we were among friends. So life and family are high priorities and should be prioritized over anything. Those are paramount. Um, and also faith, because we don't know what is going to happen at all. There's very little that we individually have control of. So where you put your faith, what you put your faith in is foundational. So those would be the things that I would say to anyone, young or old, to really uh, consider and reflect on where your priorities, make sure that they are aligned with what is enduring and eternal. That way you're probably ready for anything.
I hear you. Um, you've built the new roots right here in Alexandria. How has the Alexandria community helped you rebuild, and how do you try to pour back into it? Um,
Well,
you
I'm
didn't
still,
leave. You stuck with us. You know.
still here. Um, there's something to, there's an old adage, to bloom where you're planted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as I said, I could see God leading me to Alexandria. There were other factors that, when I reflected back, that Alexandria was how can I say it? It kept coming up in my life, although I had not spent any time here. I had spent a week here back in the early 80s for a revival with my husband, and that was that. Um, but it was like all roads were leading to Alexandria in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so to bloom where you're planted, this is where he sent me.
Mm-hmm.
And for that foreseeable future, I had to care for my family. And so it was important for me to put down roots as soon as possible. I had a teenage daughter who was just in high school, and I had an 84-year-old mother. I needed things, and we didn't have a house to go back to, that we could go back to. Schools were gone. I had to do something. So I tried to put down roots and have a sense of normalcy as soon as possible to help mitigate the trauma of having lost everything.
Wow.
For my
And
daughter, my mother, but for me too. And so that's what I did, just to try and bloom where I was planted. And then once you start looking around and seeing, well, what's here? What is there that I can put my hand to, or that I can get involved with? That's what I did.
oh, I hear you. I hear you. So, what school did your daughter attend here?
She went to Pineville.
Oh, Pineville. Okay, Pineville. Rebel. All
Yeah,
right.
because they had
Karen, you know, all of that said, did you I'm good on the questions tonight. I'm glad I had the opportunity to actually talk to you about it, and I never, you know I could only imagine what you felt. um you know you kind of expected things to be just kind of disorganized and all over the place going in there after looking at the pictures, and that's what you saw. But then when you went back and you didn't see anything, someone had just gutted it out. I you're a strong person. 'Cause I don't know and I know it's not the things, but some of those things have lots of sentimental value to them, and they're priceless and that kind of thing. And I never heard that side of the story, but I could imagine um, that occurring. I certainly could imagine that occurring, and I just wouldn't know where to even start to, what have you. With that said, Karen, do you have anything was it anything else that you needed to convey to our audience tonight that may be here with us now or may come on later that you think they need to know?
um, no, I don't think so. Just I'm just grateful that the folks here in Alexandria welcomed my family, my family, um, really just embraced us in so many ways. Um, has really helped us to make this a home um, for ourselves, and made a way for us to feel at home. And so I'm
Mhm.
really grateful for that.
Yeah.
I've gotten involved in a lot of things, and always it's been well.
It's been welcome. I hear you. I hear you. Cool, 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 cool. That being said, Karen, I definitely want to say on behalf of our team over here at Urban Cast, thank you for sharing your story and reminding us that even in the midst of tragedy, there's room for resilience, faith, and joy. Your words show us that the story of Katrina is not only about loss, but also about a community's rise, rebuild, and to hold on to hope. To our listeners, thank you for engaging with us tonight. These conversations matter because they remind us that civic engagement and accountability begins with us. Our responsibility is to take part, to speak up, and to ensure that no community is ever left behind. We also want to thank Sadler's Towing, Long's Products, Legendary Kung Fu and Tai Chi, and United Wrestling Entertainment for their support and allowing us to bring this broadcast to you tonight. And to everyone tuned in, stay engaged in Sinlaw. Sometimes we weep, and sometimes we dance, and sometimes we do both together. I want to say good night to everyone. And again, Karen, thank you so much. If you hold on 1 second, I'm going to go ahead and end our live.
Hey, did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.